Cool.
Okay, cool. We are here at the Marketer of the Day podcast. Heather Cook is here, and Heather's website is creativemaven.com. And Heather is all about Microsoft 365, SharePoint, Microsoft Teams, diversity, inclusion, belonging, community, evangelism, and events, and so many more things. So we're going to find out what Heather is all about, and more importantly, how we can tap into some of her greatness and her energy and her achievements, and just find out some of these things about leveraging event marketing in our strategies, and about how to stay ahead of the curve and adapt our marketing tactics and all these scary but at the same time exciting things. So Heather, glad to be speaking with you.
It's really wonderful to be speaking to you as well. And hello, marketers. Hello, everybody on the podcast. Thanks for having me on, Robert. This is great. So, yeah.
Glad to have you on, and you're a fellow podcaster, so I know you're all about the witty banter and the randomness and the unexpected excitedness that comes from that. So what are you all about? What's your current passion, focus? What gets you excited to jump out of bed in the morning?
Yeah, my why is spreading joy and connecting people. So that is how I get out of bed in the morning. And yeah, it's one of those where I just love going, oh, wait a minute, you and you, oh, you get together and you need to talk. So I do that a lot in my work at Microsoft. I work as a principal PM there for the Microsoft 365 team building community. So I have been doing, gosh, Microsoft work in the ecosystem literally about 23 years. And in the course of that, I've had my own business, Creative Maven, podcast. I've been a partner, I've been a customer, I've been an event producer. So I've worn many, many hats over the years and doing product launches and marketing and all that sort of thing. So yeah, so getting me out of bed is all about how I can help people tell their stories and also connect people up for the next good thing that they may eventually do. So yeah, that's my job every day, which is awesome. I love it. So.
And I can tell you help us out with our potential. And you like, and when you say connect people, you remind me of like one time I was at some event and there was like some panel and people were asking kind of the usual questions. And on the panel, people were giving the usual answers. It was just like this exchange of information. And people were talking about how they suck. I'm not even sure what it was like. Someone needed like a graphic designer. And one of the people on the panel said, hey, who in the audience here is a graphic designer? And some hands went up and the guy was like, instead of us just like talking about this question and this answer, here's someone you can hook up with to actually solve the problem instead of saying, well, let me think 6 more months until I'm just about ready. And so with all of this stuff, especially like Microsoft, it seems like they've like tapped into that whole idea of, well, you have to put this stuff into use, right? Instead of just like, hey, here's these cool features or here's these cool things you could do. Like here's the LinkedIn lives and here's the webinars and here's us demoing some exciting things. That way you can actually solve your problems instead of learning yet another term. And so like what are you all about as far as like what are these LinkedIn lives doing? Like what kind of like problems do you solve for these Microsoft people?
Sure. I mean, I think pretty much everybody is really, looking for a specific use case in the moment a lot of the time, right? Like you're looking for, you're trying to get something done and then you come to a roadblock and you're like, where do I go? Who do I ask? That kind of thing. And so there's a few places, in the Microsoft community, we have, many different platforms. The Microsoft tech community is one. If you're in the Microsoft 365 space where you can go ask questions, there's forums, there's places that you can go, YouTube has just got so many amazing videos from people in this space. Microsoft most valuable professionals, MVPs, also are folks who have amazing technical prowess, and they also, what they do is they help people in the community. So you can get to them on Twitter or X or LinkedIn, and they do tons of LinkedIn lives. So there's a ton of content out there if you're looking for a specific answer to a question, or if you're just looking to learn. I host a show on Monday mornings. I just did it this morning with my colleague Caruana, and we talk about what's happened in the last 2 weeks for Microsoft and what's looking forward, and we bring all the kind of community URLs together so that people can find things. And so it's like looking for shows like that maybe are that like Cliff Notes conglomeration of things, right? So because there's so much content to sift through, you're like, where do I go? Where do I start? So I find that I look for people that I resonate with, and I stick with them and sort of listen and figure out everything that they do depending on the product or the area of the business that I'm looking for help. So yeah.
Wonderful. And so, I mean, I know that we want to be somewhat evergreen, but what has been happening the past 2 weeks? Like, what is exciting? What did your show cover earlier today?
Well, we've got a lot of really great partnerships. OpenAI and Microsoft have a partnership, obviously, with all the things that have been happening between ChatGPT and then all of the new Copilot coming out from Microsoft. So there's been an announcement on some deeper relationships there of responsible AI and different areas where we're digging a little bit deeper in with that company about what's going to be happening moving forward. There was a show for Microsoft Fabric, which is part of the whole data platform side of the business. So Power BI and reporting and all of that, that happened in Las Vegas last week. And so there were a ton of announcements around that. And then we have communitydays.org, which is a one-stop shop for community events in the Microsoft ecosystem. So that's got free events, that has paid events. It's got a community calls list. So you can go to communitydays.org and anybody can list their event there for free that's having to do with something in the Microsoft ecosystem. So we have a lot of events cropping up locally again, especially coming out of the pandemic. Folks were doing a lot of hybrid events, and people are actually going back to events. We're seeing that in-person percentage rise of people going. But I do think people are picking like one or two shows and thinking about being really strategic and specific about where they spend their money to go get content. So I think it's been really important for people to see like who's speaking and what content's being presented and all that sort of thing. And so folks are making decisions on, where they go, because I think it's important right now. People are still being fiscally responsible and, maybe holding back a little bit from all the things maybe that they did prior to the pandemic, because a lot of things are still online. But I do believe that we humans want to be with each other. We need to be with each other and make those personal connections like in person. I was just at WonderCon this last weekend. I do panels there where I moderate, and we did one on careers. And it's just so great to have so many students and college and folks who are looking to like be in the video game design industry or working on being a screenwriter. And one of those things, best practice I always do when I'm speaking is I have my LinkedIn QR code up on a slide, making sure that everybody in the audience can connect with me. And then if they want, me to help connect them to somebody later, I do that all the time. And then having that LinkedIn QR code, with each other. And so, having them afterwards be like, all right, everybody put your LinkedIn codes up and get, switch with each other and make sure you're connected that way. Super positive and really fun because, if you're coming to a session, you're all interested in the same thing. Why wouldn't you maybe connect with each other? Right. So fun best
Right.
practice.
And I
Yeah.
was just thinking the other day that there were so many pre-pandemic events that I went to where I
Mhm.
met someone and then years later I'm like, oh yeah, I wonder what that person's doing. Or like I wish I could ask that person a question or tell someone about that, but I remember the face, I don't remember the name. And
Right.
even back then when there were paper business cards, did we really even hang on to those or even
I
know where
know.
those
I
went?
was like, I think I actually somebody gave me one the other day. So I was
Oh
like,
wow.
and literally, what I did? I took a picture of it.
Right. I mean, that's like belongs in a museum. It's like a rotary phone or something. And
Exactly.
so that's really important. Just that idea right off the bat there, just add someone on LinkedIn. And there's been times when like after this podcast, I'm going to be adding you on LinkedIn. And I've
Yep.
like even just being on a podcast with someone. And then like when it goes live, you post it. And then I'm like, oh, I can't tag the person because I should have went and added them on LinkedIn 2 weeks ago. And then I have to
Yep.
send the request and wait. And who knows if they remember me. It's like just add the person on LinkedIn while you're there. So that way you can get back to that later. And you mentioned live events. Like I feel like I've definitely lost my momentum going to live events, and it started even happening before the pandemic. It's like
Yeah.
for a while I was like I felt like I needed to meet my quota of just like go to like 3 or 4 events a year.
Right.
And
Yeah.
after a while, it kind of turned into like just more of the same stuff. And then I
Yeah.
was like, it turned into what you're saying of like then being more strategic and being like, well, why am I going? What do I
Mhm.
want to get out of it? What do I want to learn? Are there specific attendees, speakers, panelists that I want to meet or get something out of?
Yeah.
And like during the pandemic, it seems like a lot was replaced there. And I can definitely relate to what you're talking about, saying like, well, a lot of my live events needs were met from
Mhm.
the Zooms and the streaming and the webinar and the LinkedIn Live and everything. And then now I'm like, okay, but I need to get some of the realness back. And so it's kind of a lot to sort of struggle with and deal with. And it seems like from you listing some of these like there's the community days and some of these things that are happening. It's like it seems there just needs to be some awareness of just knowing that all these free resources exist, right? Or that there's these events that maybe if you want to raise your profile, up your game, get connected, to go to these sorts of events. And so, like, what do you think holds people back from making the most of these with the like the weekly meetings or the live in-person events? Like, why don't more people do it? And if someone is struggling or hesitating, what do we say to convince them to go and do more of this?
I think, I mean, it's time in the day, it's that we have very busy, noisy lives, whether and it's work and home and everything, right? So I feel like, it's about really being deliberate and mindful about where you want to give your energy and how you want to give it. So I feel like, thinking about truly what is it that you're passionate about? What is it that you truly want to learn? And I think like don't boil the ocean, right? I mean, bad for the ocean, bad for everybody, in many ways. So it's really about, like I think just try choosing one thing or one person to follow or one event that you really love. Start there if you're kind of dipping back in and sort of looking at like, oh my gosh, there's so many things going on. What do I do? The fire hose. I truly think it's, sometimes it's about taking a step back and really thinking about what do I want to learn or what do I want to really tackle. I see a lot of people in our community that they're doing so many things, and it's easy to get burnt out. It's easy to then like go to the place where you're like, oh, I'm not going to anything because I can't deal. So I think concentrating on one thing that you want to really truly become an expert on, say, and go deep there, pick a technology or pick an industry or an area really, and really focus on that and become that expert of that one thing and then add on to it, right? And then look for people, like I conglomerate a lot of things, I think that's a word, together, right? And
We'll say it is, yeah.
yes, right,
Mhm.
and hopefully help people to be able to discern, from the many things out there. And there's lots of other folks that do that kind of thing as well, right? And you can watch out for them and you can sort of look and see what interests you. But I do think it's, you have to have time to be creative and to dream and to like have a breath and like all of those things. Self-care super important. And then really choose that sort of maybe one thing or one or two things like you're doing of like, these are the two things that I'm going to really concentrate on and pick. And the rest of it, I'm going to call it maybe noise or things for another day kind of thing. I don't know. That's how I do it anyway. So, yeah.
And that's helpful. So you're saying that we need to niche down and prioritize and really have some goals, because you see these people that are like the seminar junkies or the learning junkies, and you think like, okay, like the college days, those were really fun, but when you
Yeah.
were in school, you took tests and you still had to
Mhm.
get grades and you still had to
Yep.
pass classes. So there was still some amount of goal setting and achievement involved. It wasn't just like, well, let me just dabble here and take this little class and this little class. You were actually, it had to lead to something. And I think that's a helpful insight, at least for me taking this in, that there is the nostalgia and there is the want to maybe try to get back into the lifelong learner mode, which is great, but it needs
Mhm.
to actually lead to something. It needs to actually be put to use, because otherwise it might be fun for a while, but you'll end up just like spread so thin and starting and not stopping that it's a recipe for maybe not right away, but inevitable burnout. And so, in all of the things that you've been doing and seeing and helping people and connecting others, is there anything that has surprised you or maybe made you change your trajectory that's worth talking about today?
Hmm. I think that I really like the fact that we are talking about mental health a lot more in the world in the technology world, but just in general. And I think it's really important that we've got terminology and words that we didn't have even 5 or 10 years ago, thinking about how we relate to each other, talking about neurodiversity, how like being when you're a manager as well, how to work with people that have all kinds of different things that they bring to the table, which is like thinking about inclusion as well, like every voice at the table. So I really I've concentrated a lot on making sure that I am up on those things, both as someone who speaks in front of people and also who is a manager in some ways. That's super important. And I think I look for events and I look for speakers who embrace those things as well. I look and as far as events, like having, diversity in their keynote speakers and, in the, speakers in general. So I'm paying a lot of attention to those things because it's important to me personally, and it's important to me as a producer, that I'm paying attention to that. And as I teach other event producers who are like, I want to throw a hackathon, or I want to do a day of this, or I'm doing these kinds of things. It's like, okay, do you have an event code of conduct? Are you looking at thinking about your speakership? Is it diverse? Are you addressing, ADA compliance things? Are you addressing potential neurodiversity that you will have, folks coming to an event and how they're going to consume and intake, content? So that's something that's, for me, I've been aware of it, but I'm more aware of it as we have more terminology, more thought about it, just in the world in general. So I've definitely pivoted more there for sure.
And there seems to be a lot there, and it's sometimes I like read up on it a little bit and like read some articles, and it hurts my brain a little bit with the abstractedness, and at the
Yeah.
same time I'm afraid to like have an opinion or ask questions because I'm not sure if I'm even asking the right sort of thing. But like even like 10 years ago I was talking to some speaker who was mentioning about like topics you could speak on, and he was saying like, about like having a larger scope in your talk, and he was saying like, talk about stress management. And even that term stress management like 10 years ago was like 4 bullet points worth of content, but now there's just like so much involved in like communicating and being self-aware and
Mhm.
like speaking towards different kind of speaking styles and things like
Yeah.
that. But as far as just this new world we live in, right? And in being inclusive and diverse and being aware of the neurodiversity, like what needs to be said today? Like what are people getting wrong or not asking, or just what should we know about this crazy but exciting new world?
I think what you'd said just a few moments before of like, truly it's about asking questions, and it's about like, you actually prefaced your question in the way that I think it should be asked, so you're doing it already. I think it's that, hey, I'm asking a question because I want to learn and I want to know about this, right? So it's about intent, I think, and about, putting it out there and saying, I might not get this right, but I want to understand about it. And it's also, I think, time and place, on some of that as well. So I feel like being able to ask the questions, with good intent, and also, being open. And sometimes we get it wrong. Sometimes you do. There's certain things that I've like said. I'm like, oh, wait. I'm not. I'm squarely Gen X, in my life, and so, so like I have certain things that are part of the grid or the bias, or the constructs that have been around me my entire life, and I know where I sit as a, as a white woman coming from the Midwest, and where privilege and all of those things. And so I have to consider that when I'm speaking and when I'm doing everything in the world. And so I feel like if you're thinking of just even thinking about those things is a good step in the right direction. And I think being open and asking questions and trying to figure it out is what it's all about, right? There's a lot of opinions and controversy on all kinds of things in the world, but I think if you come at it with an openness, asking questions, being curious. Curiosity, is huge. And then also with empathy. I was a theater major, before I got into all this tech stuff. And so to me, theater is all about walking in someone else's shoes. If you can do that or get someone to watch you do that as a theater artist, then you can get them to relate to a story and relate to that person, right? So I think leading with curiosity, leading with empathy, and being open, to having those conversations, is where it's at. So,
I
yeah.
love it. Curiosity, empathy, and openness. And we're just all on this path to being better, right? Being
Yeah,
better communicators and learning the knowledge and figuring out the technical skills and solving some of these problems. And so,
yep,
as far as drawing attention to what you have going on with your website and your career and the LinkedIn Lives, what are
sure.
some next steps? What are some call to actions? What should we know about? Where should we go?
Sure. I mean, for me, just like the world right now, I think business, technology, careers, LinkedIn is our calling card these days for everything. And so I do a lot of work on LinkedIn. I post a lot on LinkedIn. I have a LinkedIn newsletter, my Maven Musings, that comes out every other week. So love for you to subscribe to my newsletter. It's a little bit of everything, from sort of my life and social and what I'm doing at work. I like to have fun with something that I call the curler report. And so I put curlers, old style, like hot rollers in my hair, because I like the juxtaposition of the things that women do in order to get ready to like be on camera. And so I wear the curlers and I talk about things. And so I do that, and just it's fun. And I think it's, juxtaposing those things. I like juxtaposition, plus I like saying that word. But so LinkedIn pretty much is there. I also Hedda Maven on Instagram and TikTok, and I post things there too. So yeah, pretty much, the LinkedIn area is where you can find me most of the time. And I do respond to people who ask me questions on LinkedIn, which it's hard because I get a lot, but I think it's important to, if somebody is willing to reach out to you and say hello, that you've got to reach out back and say hi too. So that's where I concentrate most of my time. So yeah.
Wonderful. And that's linkedin.com/IN/Heather Newman to see how it's done on LinkedIn, because there are some of these people where you go on LinkedIn and they just have it dialed in, right? They're always posting, they're commenting on other people's stuff, they have good things to say, they make the
Yeah.
blog posts, they do the newsletters, they do the lives, and we could all benefit from this idea of being generous and being a teacher and raising our profile. And then in your case, you're putting those theater major skills to good use, right? With the curlers, it reminds me of like
Yes.
remember like the Ernest movies, and he would always have
Yes.
like 6 different characters. It was so much fun, and it's a great way to take something that it could be boring, right? Talking about Microsoft 365 and business intelligence and Copilot, like it could be the driest subject in the world, but if
Yeah.
we infuse our personality and have some of the empathy you're talking about, like meeting people halfway and figuring out like what gets them excited or what would wake them up, then it's possible to learn something and have fun as well. And so as far as the future, like what do you have planned, or what has you excited about the next 6 to 12 months?
Oh my goodness. I'm going to speak at a lot of events around the world, so I love doing that. I've got an event in Orlando coming up, the M365 conference at the end of April. I'm going to be in Germany at the European Collab Summit. So I've got a few things coming up. I do a lot of podcasts. I just did WonderCon. Hopefully, I'll be at Comic Con at the end of July. So, a lot of speaking events, which is great. I am going to reboot my podcast, Mavens Do It Better, and start that back up. I have been remiss for a little while, and I'm excited about that. I am working on a book talking about moments, and that comes from the podcast, asking the question, what seats you in who you are today? What moment gave you, what you are and who you're doing? I'm pulling those moments out and I'm putting them in a book. So working with all the folks who've been on my podcast to do that. So a few things in the hopper for sure. Yeah, and hopefully just more writing and continuing to put things out into the world and the universe and having fun doing it. So yeah.
Exciting. And I can tell you that you have fun, and I'm getting this lesson from you that there's not, you can't do too much speaking and communicating and podcasting and writing, right?
Yeah.
There's not enough time in the day or in your lifetime. You need to
No.
get the ideas and the content out.
There isn't. Yeah, somebody was asking us at WonderCon, they were talking about, I'm blocked, like I'm having writing block, and I was like, you got to change your state, right? You got to go outside, do a walk, take something in that's completely different than what you normally do. However, write, 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 and even if it's like a paragraph like this, like write it up, put it out there, a lot of the times, I do this too. You get hung up on like, are people gonna like this? Is this okay? Like, can I say this? Can I not say that? It's that person in your brain who's kind of a jerk, like who is always questioning, all the things you're doing. And it's like, I love the Four Agreements. That's a great book if you haven't read that, but it's, be impeccable with your word, take nothing personally, make no assumptions, and always do your best. Those four things, they go very well on a sticky note, by the way, as well. And if you can put that in your brain about, what, don't, put these, be impeccable with your word, put good things out into the world, one person, you don't always know if people like what you do unless they tell you, right? And if you're on stage, you get the applause, but Other places you don't know unless somebody says something. But I guarantee what you put out into the world, it will affect someone else. Someone else is having the same issue you're having. We all are human. We have the same issues, right? And the way we relate to each other and think that we're not so alone is that someone else says the thing that's in your brain or that you're struggling with, right? So you have a beautiful, unique story that is you. Put it out into the world, truly. Like it's fun. And I don't know. I mean, and there's a lot of people who will never do that. And that's okay too. Like you can lurk and like and comment every once in a while. Like the world is your oyster as far as how you want to engage with, put out, or consume content. But I encourage you, if you have an inkling to do that, do it. It's so fun. Seriously.
It's
Good.
fun and it's addicting in a good way. So that is motivating and inspiring that we can do those great things and we don't necessarily have to be on a Don Miguel Ruiz Four Agreements type of scope. We can just
Yeah.
write our little paragraph, change our
Yeah.
state, get the words out. And
Yep.
we all have had those people from maybe 20, 30 years ago where they said one thing or we read
Yes.
one blog post or one little thing in the book and it like helped us, stuck with us, and they don't even know we exist, and that's okay. They're helping us in our own way. So that can be the motivation to get the writing out and take the risk and do those sorts of things that need to be done, because there's people out there that will use our future help, but we need to actually take the step and do it. So this is exciting stuff to think about. Heather Newman, that's one word, on LinkedIn and then on Instagram and TikTok.
Yep.
HEDDA Maven, creativemaven.com. Heather Cook, wonderful speaking with you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Robert. This has been delightful. So I appreciate it. And thank you to your audience too. Yay. So wonderful.